everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at a bunch of recent catches along the FEC's northern section of their railroad. It's pretty close to my campus now, so I hope you guys enjoy this rendition of FEC's Northern End. As we all know by now, getting an early start is usually the move when it comes to going out for a day, but especially important when you only have a few hours to spend trackside. This Wednesday morning, I'd be out before the sun, as I knew of a solid amount of trains in the general vicinity that would soon pass by. So it's 0630 at CP Sunbeam, where the south end yard lead from FEC's Bowen Yard comes together with the main line and continues south from here from milepost 9.7. The control point here is the first on FEC's system, named after the road that crosses perpendicular to the rails, although for our case this morning, I'd set up on the quieter historic Kings Road just south of the signals. A plethora of commercial businesses make up this area, evident by the sheer amount of buildings and employees slowly filing into them as they start their own workdays. Shortly after arriving, I'd hear FEC train 208 shuffling around in the yard and talking to the Bowen Yard master, who'd, after arriving about 2 hours ago, would finally be breaking up his train, which would clear the entrance for northbound train 210. On the FEC, this red over yellow indication is a restricting signal, different than CSX's and the old SEL's lunar white indication. Things happen fast on the FEC, but thankfully for me, the sun would rise faster, as 20 minutes pass and the horizon brightens with our first light of the morning. Hearing that 210 passing Bayard, which is just south of us by only 6 miles or so, the signal here at Sunbeam would upgrade to an approach, which is this high yellow indication. And finally, at 0705, our first train of the morning would arrive, with a set of Grupo painted GEs leading the charge into town, the unfortunate norm nowadays. This is FEC train 210, a train that I've actually never seen before, as it usually departs Port Everglades around 11 p.m. every day, except Sundays and Mondays. Named PEV for short, Port Everglades is the port that breaks out of the main line and yard at Fort Lauderdale, comprising mostly of intermodal traffic and crawling containers to Jacksonville. With a few UPS stragglers and a handful of miscellaneous freight cars making up the bottom end, Sunbeam Road would finally be cleared after this 8,000-foot train cleared, which would hold road traffic for about 6 minutes on this busy morning, causing quite the stir along this little back street. Swinging around the corner are the southbound signals at Sunbeam, which guide trains out of the yard limits at Bowen and onto the main line, where trains starting here can highball south. The signals here, replaced a few years ago, already would be a sad sight for me, however, as when I was last here in June 2022, the old GR searchlights were still on the job. Waiting for permission to depart here would be train 107, who'd have 3 Champion Scheme GEs leading the way today, with a liquefied natural gas tender separating the front two. At the time, this was about as normal got down here, with 107 departing almost perfectly at 6 p.m. with all GE power. But since Grupo Mexico's acquisition and blatant ownership now bleeding onto their fleet of motive power, this consist is impossible to see nowadays, as only one Champion Scheme GEVO exists. Just a couple miles north of Sunbeam is FEC's Jacksonville facilities at Bowen Yard. Making his initial money off of Standard Oil in New York City, the well-known Henry Flagler soon fell in love with Florida as he traveled to Jacksonville and south to St. Augustine on holiday. However, he'd take note of the present Jacksonville-St. Augustine and Halifax River Railway, which was built in 1883 and began service soon after using narrow-gauge trackage that was hastily built. With plans to settle a hotel in St. Augustine, Flagler found the little railway unfit for increased service and inadequate for any patrons or passengers that he arranged to book at his hotel. By 1885, Flagler found himself on the board of the small railway, buying the entire company just 3 weeks after his addition to the company. Work began quickly, and by 1888, Flagler had 3 hotels in the greater St. Augustine area, and would soon after employ the Jacksonville Bridge Company to construct a span across the St. Johns River in downtown to connect his railway with the rest of the nation. Soon, interchange traffic was arranged, and the many railroads in Jacksonville quickly became acquainted with Mr. Flagler and his thriving railroad, which by 1892 would begin expansion down to Miami. The initial yard for that interchange was right here in Bowden, and it's the exact same way today, seeing a myriad of jobs from both NS and CSX on the daily, as well as being the origination and terminating yard for the majority of trains on the system. Today, Bowden is a massive headquarters with engine shops, car repair facilities, flat switching, intermodal ramps, and interchange trackage all in the mix, which you can get a glimpse of in these vague aerial views. This place is huge, and I hope to soon document more from here. For now, though, I'd hear a train down at Bayard, so that's where I'd go. Arriving with just seconds to spare and on the backlit side, I'd set up for FEC 905, an extra 905 job that I guess used to be the old Job 70, now running as an extra 905 to Bayard today, but only calling signals on the radio as 430, their lead engine, which yes, would be much to my surprise, the specially painted Jeep 40 that honors our country's brave veterans. 430 would be coming up to the switch here at North Bayard in order to run around his train, which would give me a few minutes to relocate on the correct side of the tracks as he now backs into the siding to couple back onto his train. With a short train of commerce from the greater Bayard area, the 430 job would get out here around 2 a.m. this morning and begin switching the number of industries off their respective spurs and branches. And now, here in broad daylight just after 8 p.m., they'd be ready to call it a day and head back to Bowden. Looking north, our train would soon get permission from the FEC dispatcher to head north on signal indication, which he'd get momentarily, from siding to the main.
I'm about to get a signal northbound off the siding here in Bayard, head back to Bayard.
The 430 would be a nice catch this morning, and one that's not terribly normal at this time of day. He'd be off to breakfast now, which would allow me to get some time with the main attraction here at Bayard. Founded in 1904 after the merger of three separate companies, General Railway Signal Company, or GRS for short, began operations that same year and soon attained major contracts with massive railroad companies. By 1930, the company was one of 30 stocks on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, portraying just how big and successful this company actually was. The reason? They made really reliable products, like their model GRS Searchlight, 3 of which remain in 2025 at the north end of Bayard. These models, likely made over 70 years ago, are the last of their kind in the state for revenue service, guiding trains in and out of the busy siding, the first south of Jacksonville on this 350-mile racetrack to South Florida. Bayard is a favorite spot for many because of these signals, and for dispatchers, as it is a 3-mile siding and the primary pass track in this area, as I'd soon learn and get to see in full display today.
Well, unlike CSX, FEC tends to be kind of quiet on the radio, but they still have to talk to their dispatcher, and they do call out signals. So what I've just heard is northbound train 202 is meeting train 905 here at Bayard. 202 is the northbound, 905 is the local coming south out of Bowden, and they're going to meet right here in front of these old searchlights.
I'd have to set up quick, as just a couple moments go by and FEC train 202 shows his face, after calling and passing an approach signal at the south end of the siding here. He'd slow to a crawl as FEC 905, the real 905, would approach from the north, prepared to take the siding at track speed. Since 905 is a much shorter train and one that'll clear the north end switch fairly quickly, 202 doesn't even have to stop, as a green would swing into place on the signals here, directing 202 north back to track speed. Coming out of a late night departure from Hialeah, this 202 train rips north with intermodal for Bowden, with a pre-dawn stop at Titusville, where the intermodal ramp is switched and where cars can be dropped or picked up before continuing north to Bowden. Today's 202 wouldn't be terribly long, so by the time he'd be passing us here at the north end signals, 905 would already be back on the main line behind him, barreling towards Bunnell, where his first customers and jobs of the day reside. About 25 minutes pass, and once again, the northbound mainline signal at Bayard swings to a green as FEC train 204 now approaches. 204 would be running a bit early this morning, leaving Fort Pierce in the pre-dawn as per usual, but showing his face around 9:50 a.m., which is a bit earlier than normal, commonly seen in this area between 10 and 11 a.m. Running as a Tuesday through Saturday job now, train 204 comes out of Fort Pierce, and similar to the 202, works Titusville on his speedy trek to Jacksonville. Unfortunately, this train in the past was usually a sure bet for EMD power, now pretty much always led by a GE wide cab, a practice adopted about 7 months ago around the new year. Not sure if it's something to do with crew preference or updated software within the engines, but it's really a shame seeing these blue GEs take over another job that was dominated by champion schemed ST40s and Jeeps. With the morning rush now past, I'd head back to campus for class, but would soon be back out just a couple days later around noontime as FEC 105 prepares to depart Bowden. A couple of years ago, rail fans in this area were worried about the signals at North Bayard quite a lot, as the signals at South Bayard were replaced with these Safe Train variants. Installed with LED lights and approach lit, like most of the other signals on this line, South Bayard would be my spot for southbound train 105, as he'd depart Bowden shortly after 1 p.m. today, meeting me and the incoming rain here. .105 is more intermodal from Jax to Miami, and a common catch around here, as it departs Monday through Fridays, usually around this 1 p.m. time slot, making it here to Bayard at 1:20 today at track speed, with a string of trailers and containers for Southern Floridian ramps and ports. Meeting the 105 at Magnolia would be train 905, who would be back on his way to Bowden today, again a bit earlier than usual. Magnolia is on the outskirts of St. Augustine near the town's small airport, which is about 10 miles from our stance. That being said, I'd head to the north end of Bayard for the shot, as 905 races the thunderstorms north.
Engine 431, clear north end of Bayard.
Next would be FEC train 107, another intermodal and freight hotshot out of FEC's Bowen Yard for Miami, dropping off UPS piggyback traffic at Fort Lauderdale on his way to Hialeah and FEC's southern end at Miami.
Well, folks, we are heading right back to Bayard this evening, I should say. Got 206 coming north. We should get a 109. Evidently the police are on the chase for something too. But that 206 is wanted because of its leader. It's got the last Champ Givo on it. And that's a kind of a big deal. Kind of sad that it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. So we're gonna try and see that tonight. I believe it's number 821, don't quote me. But that's the move right now.
Setting up now on the other side of those signals that we were at this morning, a diverging approach signal would greet us as FEC 109 approaches from the north, set to meet that 206 here at Bayard. According to the FEC rulebook, this red over yellow over red indication tells a crew to proceed through the diverging route, observing prescribed speed through the turnout or crossover, prepared to stop at the next signal ahead. I guess these turnouts are fairly long, as when 109 would get to us, he wouldn't be preparing to stop, he'd be rolling.
Train 109, engine 805. Roger, right approach. North Bay.
Departing just after 9 p.m. this night, 109 works Titusville and West Palm Beach on his way south, his West Palm stop being the only mainline train the Port of Palm Beach gets, currently a Sunday through Friday operation for these guys. After West Palm, the train continues to Port Everglades where it'll terminate and soon spin to become the next day's 210. .109 would slow to a stop inside of Bayard, as 206 would still be about 20 minutes out by now. I take the opportunity to meet up with a couple of cool local rail fans and relocate now next to the shopping plaza just north of the siding signals where some LED parking lot lights bleed onto the tracks. At 10 p.m. on the dot, 206 would arrive, with 821 leading a long train as advertised, highballing at track speed. Running now as a Tuesday through Friday train out of Miami, 206 carries mixed freight for Bowden, made up of rock, intermodal, general merchandise, and auto racks, all out of the Miami area with no working route. Even then, however, after dodging bright lines up to Cocoa Beach and some other freight traffic further north, it'll still take this train about 10 hours from one end of the system to the other, which by today's railroad standards is very quick, hence the nickname for the FEC, Florida Speedway. 206 would wrap up my time on FEC, as I'd make the short drive back now just after 10 p.m. I really hope y'all enjoyed this one, as there will be lots more FEC to see in the near future as I get acquainted with this railway, so I hope you all decide to come with me as I do so. But for now, and until we meet again somewhere trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films, end of transmission.